Chapter 11 Apollyon's Confession. After a few weeks of using his artificial body, Apollyon met up with Dr. Kitsune in his workbench to check on the calibrations. After a short examination, Dr. Kitsune said, "Everything looks good and has exceeded expectations. However, since this artificial body was made using reverse-engineered technology from a long-lost civilization, I've come to notice a few new features that would help you in your bounty hunter endeavors." Apollyon then asked, "What makes you think I'm a bounty hunter?" Dr. Kitsune then points out Apollyon's bounty hunter's license and said, "That's a mercenary's badge from the War to End All Wars. I remember seeing my fellow Kitsunes bear that same emblem when they went on to fight for Solsura against the Third Lunar Empire. Now it's used by the Zolshuran government for cooperating with private volunteers to do certain missions that would be too low profile for the Zolshuran military or police force to get involved with." Apollyon then shrugs. "You got me there. I'm a bounty hunter and not just a movie star from Empire of the Moon. What else did you figure out about me?" "I've also figured out that you're not completely Zolshuran raised, because you don't carry a Zolshuran pistol. Smith & Wesson is an American made, and American products have been banned in Solsura since the beginning of the American Solsuran War." "How do you know if I didn't just get it off the black market or smuggle it in through Kekistan or the Lunar Queendom?" "For starters, you don't seem like the type of person to be involved with illegal smuggling, and black markets being that you're a lawful bounty hunter and not a black market salesman." "I guess you would be right there. I'm not much of a salesman anyway. But do you know why I became a bounty hunter? Is it because you have a vendetta against someone? I know you're not a violent person. If anything, you have a lot more in common with Sweet Udenthio than you do with Andrew Jackson." "As a matter of fact, I do. But who do you think I have a vendetta against?" "Knowing how unpredictable you are, I wouldn't expect it to be someone who comes first to mind. So I'm lost for words." "Thank the Queen of the Lunar Queendom herself. She's someone I always had a vendetta against, as well as my cousin Vixarina, who hates her also. I could care less about the prize money the Zolshuan government has on Poxura's head, so long as it gives me an opportunity to enact my revenge without any negative repercussions against me or the Caroline people. And having a good relationship with my cousin Vixarina and the Confederate Republic of Caroline, I've realized just how much they hate the Vertok theocracy. And if the time was right, I bet Caroline and McQuan would start a revolution against Poxer's regime in a heartbeat. And knowing Vixarina personally, I try not to act like other sorcerers who have this false idea that the Lunar Queendom is nothing but Zolshuran hating Vertok degenerates. Half the Queendom is already Christian and oftentimes much more tolerant of people with Zolshuran ancestry than Zolshuran fringe is of people with Celanese descent. Heck, I wouldn't even consider Zolshuran fringe radicals real Zolsurans when they don't even stand for the flag nor believe in the Zolshuran cardinal virtues of life, liberty, and the pursuit of eternal happiness, while also believing hardcore racists. If anything, I think the Zolshuran radicals should be deported to the Lunar Queendom outside of McQuan and Caroline and have their citizenship revoked so they can't come back. At least there, they'll be able to enjoy the authoritarian government and persecution of religious and ethnic minorities that they so desperately advocate for in Solsura." Dr. Kitsune then crossed his arms and said, "Tell me about it. We have a similar problem in the Kitsune clan, with young people being taught to support radical socialism, while denying our traditions and heritage when we were the ones fighting the National Socialists of the Third Lunar Empire, so they wouldn't have to see the gas chambers and the death camps in Kekistan. If I ever had kids, and one of them was professing socialist, I would confiscate all his or her paychecks and give them no food till they would realize what it's really like to live in socialism. But sadly, it was the cult of collectivism and radicals that caused the Solsuran government to abandon Miquan and Caroline and leave them defenseless when the Lunar Queendom annexed them. The only thing the Age of Restoration ever restored was the Veritak hegemony that ran that country into the ground for the past 1,000 years. And it probably wouldn't have happened if Sorcerer didn't elect a pansy president. And now for the Veritak regime that could have been destroyed. The Veritak regime has only tightened its grip on Mequon and Caroline, with further geopolitical complications, if Sorcerer ever tried to liberate them for a second time. Now if Sorcerer tries to get involved with Mequon and Caroline, a second war to end all wars might just happen, knowing why the first one happened. The Celanese nobility would just falsely accuse Sorcerer of what they themselves are guilty of, and have everyone declare war on Sorcerer, which might just go nuclear. Apollyon then twirls his Smith & Wesson revolver with unfinished notches with the names of Luna Queendom nobility and Poxurus name and says, "And it's because of the Celanese nobles, guilty of crimes against humanity, of that queendom that I chose to take on the bounty contract to bring them to justice. When the day comes at high noon on Artemis's 26th birthday, on the day of her coronation, the day the Veritak festival of rebirth to their goddess Luna herself, I will bring retribution upon those wicked Veritak enemies of the cross and truth itself. And in their dying breath I will be given a last chance to repent of their sins and spare their eternal damnation. For as Pharaoh of Exodus was punished for his oppression of God's people, so will the Veritak overlords be destroyed for the oppression of every man, woman, and child to the height of their wickedness, where there is no escape. They will not go unpunished." Dr. Kitsune then slowly claps with his hands while waving his nine tails in applause and said, "Bravo! If I thought you said that behind a podium, in front of a congregation, I would have thought you were a Baptist preacher. But of course, you're a scoundrel bounty hunter. However, when the time comes to duel Queen Poxura, if you hurt Artemis at all in your battle against the Celanese royal family, I'll see to it personally that I steal your Marlin 336 and shoot you with it until the tube's empty. She's not like the rest of the Celanese nobles, and to hurt her is like committing fratricide. Thus I would find it nearly impossible to forgive you if you were to hurt ever to do such a thing." Apollyon then puts his hands on his hips and laughs. "Since remember you two wanted to advocate for using guns and committing to Zulshuman justice, I thought you hated my guts for owning hundreds of them and that you would never hold one in your life." Dr. Kitsune then glares into Apollyon's eyes with his fox ears perked forward and says, "Even though I will never understand your culture's obsession with guns, I'll be Zulshuman for a day if need be. Morality exists beyond borders and race and applies to everyone equally, even you." "So does that mean you admit Zulsura is superior to the Kitsune clan?" "No, I'm saying I'll use a gun if necessary, but Zulsura has its own fair share of problems as well. For example, your country spends trillions of dollars a year on military, yet almost nothing on keeping people out of poverty. Seriously, you Zulsurans have more guns than you have people. The dogs have guns, the cats have guns, even the babies have guns, everything has a gun. Well, at least that means we'll be able to kick anyone's ass if they ever tried to invade us." Dr. Kitsune then laughs like a friendly fox and says, "If there's anything I do like about you Zulsurans, it's your open patriotism. I'm well aware of what Zulsura is capable of. But unfortunately, this pointless war is either going to end in either mutually assured destruction or a forever stalemate. But then again, why would Zulsura and the United States be fighting each other when they have so much in common already, and essentially have no reason to be at war at all? Call me a conspiracy theorist if you will, but something inside me tells me this whole war was a setup. Almost like an outside force is intent on causing them to destroy each other. After all, Zulsura is the leader of the free world on this planet. And what better for a tyrant to gain power than when the strongest force of freedom on this world has been neutralized? If Zulsura falls, Celestia will no longer be free, will be nothing more than a subjugated extension of our existing tyrants. If there was no sorcerer to ensure that the Lunar Queentum wouldn't commit another mass genocide or ethnic cleansing of elves and nymphs? Or what if there was no sorcerer to stop the Sky Kingdom from acquiring nuclear weapons when they might actually use them? Apollyon then nods in agreement. Then I guess you could say Zulcer is a real force of good in the world, isn't she? But if I could legally shoot one of those traitors who try to indoctrinate our youth with their BS, I would. Maybe then they'll stop protesting about how good they have it living in Solcera. Seriously, how can someone complain about having so many great opportunities in life and having access to the best the world offers just by virtue of being born in Solcera? Dr. Kitsune then huffs as he answers. Perhaps living in constant luxury and peace makes them forget how much their freedom is worth. Speaking of myself, being born in the late Middle Ages when Kekistan and Solcer were ruled by feudal lords and monarchs, I've come to cherish my freedom far more than what most young people would today. Most young Keks don't realize how devastating the war to end all wars really was, and just how terrible their desired socialism actually is, that they are being lied to by the ones who are supposed to educate them. Now most schoolchildren can't even name one thing Speaker of Luna, Empress Diana the Terrible of the Third Luna Empire was responsible for. Yet she is the deceased mother of the Queen Poxera of the Lunar Queendom, and caused the untimely deaths of 24 million Christians, elves, and nymphs in the National Socialist concentration camps and later communist gulags. Tell me about it. Everything bad that happens in our hemisphere of the world comes out of the north from Selene. Not Maquan or Caroline Selene, but the real Vertok Selene. And if anything, using nuclear weapons to end the war was an act of mercy. Us Zolsherwans could have annihilated their entire queendom given enough time, and it's a good thing they surrendered when they did. I guess we can both agree that the Lunar Queendom apart from Maquan and Caroline is terrible. But what would you do if your sister ever ended up like her mother? I'd have a hard time recognizing her as my own sister. I'm not sure if I would even try to stop her, even if that means defending my country from what Lunsar is to become. My sister isn't like my stepmother, where I had a reason to hate her, and have always hated her. Unlike Poxera, I've always loved my sister, and even broke the law to keep her safe. I lied to the United States law enforcement in order to keep her identity a secret, and keep her from becoming their puppet. I've even shot Poxer with my father's own revolver when I learned she was being forced into that Vertok cult. Thankfully, the sheriff had a good enough conscience to rule it self-defense and not murder. If only I'd killed that evil woman sooner, I wouldn't have this problem that I do now. But thankfully, Solcera has a bounty on Poxera's head, so now it means to end what she started, forever. Meanwhile, Artemis was visiting her cousin Vixarina and drinking some orange tea with a good friend Edenthiel Enamoured, the moonlight maiden Miku Sephora of the former kingdom of Maquan. Joined them on the front porch of Miss Vixarina Lunsar's southern-style plantation house, where wild cotton grew in the uninhabited fields of her dwelling. Then after Miku had joined them, Vixarina poured her a glass of sweet tea with ice on this hot and humid summer's day. Miku then sat down on the porch bench, loosening her kimono in order to cool off, and said, "Thank you for inviting me to your house. It's not every day I get to see you and Artemis together, especially since I'm currently presiding over parliament hearings and the Prime Minister all the time in my province. Plus, Poxera isn't the nicest person in the world, and doesn't like you hanging out with Artemis for whatever reason." Vixarina then scoffs. "Pugh, Who cares what Poxworth thinks? Artemis is part of my family, and she'll be treated as such. You do realize how much danger you're putting the future heir of this queendom in, right? As if. Artemis is very capable of defending herself, and if need be, I'll be there. And besides, the Lunar Queendom wouldn't be anywhere without Caroline, as Caroline is the gateway to the outside world. It is, therefore, our manifest destiny to become the new rulers of this queendom, as it was made manifest for Zulsura to destroy the Zulsuran royal chains that bound them. You do understand that I am royalty, right? But you're good royalty, and not like the vast majority of royals who couldn't care less about where the rest of us live. I could really use a good Ephesian guillotine right now. Oh, those damn Lunsaran elitists. If only I didn't share their name, would my life be so much better. But you do, so what now? Now I intend to make Caroline as self-sufficient as possible. So we need nothing from Lunsar and the rest of this damn queendom, while the Lunsarans and the entire Vertok population need us. That way, we hold a 45-70 to their heads and leave them defenseless. Us Confederates learned our lesson not to rely on other countries after Zulsura betrayed us. Now it sounds like you're preparing for a civil war that I intend to keep Miquon out of, but I digress. That is until you realize the Vertok infidels will come for you next. I wouldn't call it a civil war because the Vertok infidels are savages. And if the Vertok infidels are going to be even more hostile to us Christians and patriots, we will bring those savages of war like they have never seen before, and it will be so one-sided that they will only know suffering without pity nor mercy. They've had the past 2,000 years to repent of their primitive nature, and soon the time of their judgment. And those who convert to our righteous faith and civilized ways will be spared, and those who choose to remain in their savagery will be damned forever and forgotten, as it should be. I think you're conflating Christianity with the resentment of your new overlords, when your own people made themselves dependent on Zulsura due to your complacency, and now you pay the price. I am not. At least unlike Miquon, where we were on the right side of the war to end our wars and didn't get nuked twice. Only after you surrendered 78 days and needed Zulsura to bail you out. Not true. No true Caroline Confederate ever surrenders, not our damn leaders turned against us, and we fought tooth and nail to defend our homeland while Miquon committed suicide and sacrificed for nothing more than their leader's ego. While Miko and Vixen are continuing their heated discussion, Artemis said to Identhio, I really hope these two never start a civil war. If they did, it would probably be the end of us. Identhio then asked, What do you mean it would be the end of us? How do I explain it to someone who doesn't know anything about Lunar Queendom politics or culture? If Miquon and Caroline ever had a civil war, you can bet there would be far more bloodshed than anything Zulsura has ever done to us, including all the Crusades, and even the war to end all wars. According to the Royal War Department's analysis, most of Vertok Luna would likely side with Miquon because Miquon still has ties to my royal family. But then Caroline would likely respond by using mass starvation as a weapon of unequally assured destruction on entire Vertok regions, killing more than anyone, even in the atomic bombs dropped by Zulsura within the first year. I really pray to Luna that the royal families would stop poking the grizzly bear of Caroline wielding a 45-70 lever-action rifle before they actually decide to starve the entire queendom to death. And as a believer in the Enlightenment sect of the Vertok religion, I think the Caroline Christians have a right to be pissed off at the way the Orthodox Vertok royal families have treated them, especially since the royal families are more pious to the goddess of wealth than Mother Luna's good judgment. And if Zulsura somehow gets involved with helping Caroline in a rebellion, it would likely be so one-sided it wouldn't even be considered a war but a genocide. As it stands now, Celine can't compare herself to the sheer size of Zulsuran industrial might and military prowess, nor the connection Sorcerer has with Caroline ever since Caroline helped them gain their independence in 1779. I really hope and pray for the best that we don't have our own version of the Second American Civil War. But we must be prepared if the worst is to happen. Gentile then gives a concerned expression and says, I sure hope so. I remember talking to an 82-year-old veteran of the Second American Civil War, and I wouldn't wish such a war on anyone. Then Gentile started to shed a tear and continues, some of the things he told me were so horrible that I couldn't stop myself from crying. Just imagine the families torn apart, the needless bloodshed, and millions of people dying because of the hatred people held towards each other. And if what you tell me is true about your queendom's brooding civil war, I really hope it doesn't turn out like California and New York on April 14, 2035, and the reign of terror that followed. Artemis then ponders her childhood memories of her American upbringing, and solemnly replies, I hope so too, before falling silent.